La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah.
Why or how did you come to begin to meditate and to start being interested in meditation?
Well, meditation, I think, interested me many years ago. I saw it as a kind of exotic practice many, many years ago. I'm saying maybe in my teenage years. I never really practiced, but I would say, at least back then. But in hindsight, when I look back, I see that all I was up to was meditating, that I was very interested in it. When I, for example, played basketball, we call this thing, being in the zone. When when playing at your peak, or playing well, or beautifully, or perfectly, seamlessly, is almost without effort, right? There's efforting, there's action, but you're in some other place internally, and with everything that's happening, that you're in the zone, as they call it. That's really a meditative experience, but I didn't realize that. So I was not consciously meditating, but I loved that, and that's why I always practiced sports, basketball, the martial arts, especially with certain martial arts forms that combine physical movement with being more consciously present and aligning your breath with your strikes. All of that is really a form of meditation. So in hindsight, I realized that is what I always loved in those things. Fast forward, I had joined a spiritual circle, a spiritual community, what we call a tariqah, an Islamic spiritual community, in which the central practice was the Dhikr, the remembrance of God, the invocatory, a routine practice of invocation of Quranic formulas and various divine names, and even the supreme name Allah. And one would have to make a routine of this every day, a few times a day, for a certain amount of time, to sit for God and to simply remember God, invoke God. One would be successful at this practice if they were sincere in their intention and paying attention. So all of that is meditation. So I began to realize this, especially during our monthly spiritual khalwas, our isolated solitary retreats with the invocation. And it was then that I realized that I was more so entering a more grounded meditative state. And so much so that even after those experiences, those monthly endeavors of a few hours at a time or so, that for even a week or 2 weeks after that, I felt much more grounded and focused whenever I returned to the practice of invocation. So I realized that that practice, that experience in khalwa, in solitary spiritual retreat, had an effect on my soul. So it was later that I put all this all together, when I was in a health or healing program, and we practiced all together conscious breathing, silent meditation for about 20 minutes to half hour at a time. I realized that I would immediately come into a meditative state, usually. And I realized that my practice of invocation for all these years helped me. And I more or less realized at that point that this state of inwardness, this condition of the attention being one-pointed and turning inward and resting in itself, was what I was after. Of course, I was seeking God, but I realized that I could be present with God even more when I was in this state. And so then I realized that actually one's practice should explicate this, should actually point to this out more. So I realized this in these conscious breathing meditations that we did in the retreat. So I began quite naturally first recognizing it in my practices and in my everyday life, in the moments of silence, in the moments of stillness, even in the moments of before falling asleep and waking up, in my moments of being in between patients even in my moments of listening to patients as they speak and they mention their concerns or their complaints about their health. All of this, then I awaken to the realization that all of this is meditation. That I'm actually, always, meditating in and as the state of meditation. So it was these things that made me realize I was always meditating, and that the spiritual retreat, especially in that I was in a deep state of meditation, of meditative presence while invoking, God's name, the supreme name, Allah. And then I began to look into this more inside of Islam and outside of the Islamic tradition in regards to how do other human beings, practice meditation in a natural sense, but also, as practices. And this opened me to a whole new way of appreciating meditation and how to harness the practice and its internal state, so that one can bring it into spiritual practice, into worship, into interactions with others, simply listening, to them and with them, helping patients, simply listening, to being present more for my loved ones, and even helping seekers, just simply listening to what they're saying beyond and before their words. All of that for me became meditation.
لا إله إلا الله 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 لا إله إلا الله